Ambassador to Austria, Laura Gil, who is here to comment the current policy that Colombia is implementing. So thank you, Laura, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much. Let me express first the gratitude to the Centro de Estudios Sociales, Legales y Sociales for this invitation, and thanks to all delegations and civil society organizations that co-sponsored this event. But most of all, let me send a greeting to Colombian civil society organizations, because they were our guiding light during the very, very difficult years we had to endure. So the Truth Commission in Colombia, in its final report, identified drug trafficking as a factor of persistence of the armed conflict. And all the actors in the armed conflict were involved and are involved in drug trafficking. So drug trafficking is a factor that extended the conflict and the degradation of the war, and remains one of the major obstacles to, one, peace in Colombia, and two, development in Colombia. And I will not tire of saying this. Colombia is tired. I will not tire of saying Colombia is tired, because we are tired of external recipes. For 6 decades, as President Petro said in his intervention before the plenary of the CND, Colombia was the poster child of the war against drugs. And this war, which was imposed on us by the United States, was also the direct result of the prohibitionism that to this day prevails in Vienna. So let's not lose sight of that. So in the face of failure, my country opted for change. And the new policy on drugs is revolutionary. And revolution for us means common sense. We are making a revolution because we have returned to our senses. We are no longer willing to offer dead Colombians in sacrifice for someone else's global policy. And we do believe in common and shared responsibility. As a matter of fact, that was a principle that came out of Colombia. We formulated it and proposed it to the world in the 80s. But this common and shared responsibility has turned into a blaming game. I produce because you consume, and I consume because you produce. We are committed to overcoming this finger pointing by becoming the visible face of discontent with a global drugs regime that seems to have lost its moral compass. So domestically, we have moved forward. We have adopted a new national drug policy, a people-centered policy, which was drafted with the people in consultation, in visits with territory. More than 274 organizations of civil society participated, 2,700 social leaders provided their inputs, and we put the right of life above everything else, because we believe people's lives matter. So, and our new drug policy has two main pillars. We call one oxygen, we call the other one asphyxia. The first pillar is aiming at ending the dependence of the population on the economies of drugs, as well as avoiding the criminalization of peasants. We are no longer persecuting peasant communities in Colombia. As fast exchange means that we continue making efforts for the dismantling and reducing the influence and capacity of criminal organizations that profit from drug trafficking. As a matter of fact, the number of seizures in Colombia has dramatically increased since this government took over. By placing the people at the center of this action, we want to uphold the respect for human rights, the protection of the environment, and the promotion of peace and justice. We want to protect vulnerable populations, rural and indigenous communities, and we think we have a historical opportunity right now in addressing cross-cutting issues such as racial and indigenous justice, gender equality, and youth rights. But at the international level, our crusade is against hypocrisy and for pragmatism. So, for over 30 years, every major UN political declaration here in Vienna says that the world drug phenomenon must be carried out in full conformity with all human rights and fundamental freedoms. So, I get a lot of questions here from delegations who say, why is there so much resistance to have in full conformity with the drug conventions in CND official documents? And my response is, because of the same reason why you don't want International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and so on. If we were in a place where we all accept in full conformity with the drug conventions and the list of international human rights treaties that bind us as much as the conventions, Colombia will go with that. But we are not in a place where that's acceptable. So, we believe the report of the Human Rights Commissioner gives us an opportunity. 30 years ago, I was a grad student at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and I remember I was already studying the lack of coordination, the lack of coherence between New York, Geneva, and Vienna. 30 years later, I come here as an ambassador, and I find myself having to dispute arguments like human rights can only be discussed in Geneva. Here in Vienna, we discuss drugs. I'm quoting, I'm not exaggerating, these are direct quotes. So, Colombia is fully committed to one United Nations. Colombia is fully committed to human rights, and Colombia will support the High Commissioner for Human Rights to bring human rights into global drug policy. Now, what do we have here? We hear about flexibility of the conventions, and no, we see actually is lack of flexibility, a lot of rigidity. Canada and Uruguay get blasted every single year for having regulated cannabis. So, we are going to bring some honesty to this conversation. This is what you get. There's nothing else. I'm frank, I'm direct, and I avoid diplomatic talk because I believe my country has no time to waste. We need a change, we need it right now, we need it right now. And I will work as much as I can to respond to the mandate that my president has given me. And the mandate he has given me is to bring some change to Vienna. And I'll tell you something. Today, I'm wearing this. This is a Colombian peasant. And I expect to be the voice of Colombian peasant communities in Vienna. Thank you.
Colombia, potencia de la vida.